Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy. You know, one of the things we like to talk a lot about here on Morning Newsbeat is the notion of dealing with reality. You have to deal with, for example, the competition that you actually have, not the competition you'd like to have. If you're only dealing with the competition that you'd like to have, then basically what you're doing is you're engaging in wishful thinking. You're out hunting for sharks, and you don't have nearly a big enough boat. Yes, a movie reference, obviously from Jaws. But I was thinking about the whole notion of dealing with reality the other day when I saw a figure from the U.S. Department of Labor that said right now in the United States, there are about 5.2 million jobs that are available. 5.2 million jobs. That's extraordinary. It is, in fact, the largest number of available jobs since they started keeping track of that number back in the year 2000. The largest number of available jobs in the United States in the last 16 years. And that's extraordinary. Now listen, I don't want to get into the political debate about unemployment versus underemployment, about how strong the economy needs to get, what kind of growth we need to achieve. Let's just stipulate for the purpose of this argument that there's still too much unemployment, there's way too much underemployment, the economy needs to be stronger, and we need to have more growth. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, no matter what political party you happen to be in. But the thing is, I think you have to still focus on that available jobs number and think about what does that really mean. And one of the things that I thought was most interesting in the story that I read about this number was the expert who said the real problem is you've got this enormous mismatch between the people who are looking for work and the jobs that are available. Now let's think about that for a second. Let's cast it in really stark terms for a moment. Essentially what the problem is you've got all these computer programming jobs that are available, and you've got all these coal miners who are looking for work. And never the twain shall meet. And it seems to me at some level in our country, one of the things we have to do is figure out a way to make a match. We have to figure out ways for the twain to meet, if I can continue with the use of that particular phrase. Now, I'm going to speak as a taxpayer here for a second. What would happen is if we made a major national effort to build or create computer programming schools in some of the communities that have been hardest hit by the economy and where the businesses that used to be there simply may not be coming back or will not be coming back with any sort of speed. What if you started to educate those people about how to do things like program computers? Wouldn't that make sense? Because once they were skilled at programming computers, well, gosh, they'd make more money. They'd pay taxes, they'd buy more groceries, they'd buy clothes, they would buy cars, they'd buy homes, they'd pay for educations and relevant educations for their own children. And the thing is, especially when it comes to things like, modern careers, like things like computer programming, you wouldn't necessarily have to move. You could stay in those communities. You might even be able to create these little Silicon Valleys all over the country in places that had been decimated by the changes in the economy. Wouldn't that make sense? And wouldn't that be great? Because in these little Silicon Valleys, what would you need? Well, God, supermarkets would open up and car dealerships would open up and they'd build housing and there'd be coffee shops and people would be able to afford, $4 lattes, and it would be absolutely fabulous. Now listen, I know it's not quite as simple as that. The choices are not always as stark as computer programming versus coal miners. It just doesn't simply work that way. But clearly the experts are saying that there is a mismatch. And it seems to me that one of the things that we sort of have to have a national effort towards, regardless of political party, is the idea of figuring out how do you close that gap in a way that is meaningful and relevant, and that essentially is going to put the country on a path where it's dealing with reality. It's dealing with competition the way it actually is, as opposed to the competition we'd like to have. Listen, basically what I'm talking about is making sure that we as a nation have a big enough boat. And sometimes it worries me, and this concerns me across the political spectrum, that people simply are not thinking that way. There's 5.2 million jobs out there. I think we have to find a way to fill them. We can't just wring our hands about the mismatch. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this Thursday morning, and as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.